Howdy folks and welcome back. I thought I'd continue on the hype train of the Red Corsair stuff and follow up my Badab Bad Boys video with a straight Red Corsair tutorial on this awesome looking miniature that Games Workshop sent me, along with the entire battle force as well. So thanks again for that. The Raiders were fantastic miniatures and I really enjoyed painting up all 10 of those in the old school Badab scheme. So if you haven't seen that video already, go check it out. I did Lamenters, I did Mantis Warriors, and a host of others as well. In this one, however, we're going to keep things nice and simple and go with the traditional Red Corsairs black and red scheme, but in my style of less is more. Now I say less is more. There are a few more processes in here because this is the sort of captain in the army, so I did want to make this one a little bit more special just so that he stands out next to the general grunts in this army. I'll guide you through the entire process here step by step, and we'll talk about some of the decisions I made in terms of colors and techniques used to create this Red Corsair badass. To kick things off, we started the model by spraying it all over with a Chaos Black primer. I want this model nice and grimdark despite its bright scheme. I find most of the miniatures that I paint tend to come from a black background. It's not very often that I use any other color other than a black prime. Building up from dark is a lot easier to go from light to dark, so it's always better if you're doing grimdark sort of stuff generally and you want more contrast and more shadow to start with the darkest prime possible. The first thing we're going to do here is start working on the red parts of the armor. I don't want more than 50% of this armor to be red, so I'm going to pick out some of the key details and add some contrast into this by sort of splitting the armor 50-50 with black and red. And to start things off, I'm going to go with Dryad Bark just to block out any of the areas that I want to do red later on. The model is still very dark at this point, but you can just make out the brown on the areas that are all going to be red. So let's go to the next step now. The next color I'm going to be using here is Blanched Berry. I used this color on my Adepta Sororitas recently that were featured in a Warhammer community article as well, so go and check those out as well. I've also got photos of those guys on my Instagram too, but black and Blanched Berry are just perfect colors. They're just so awesome together. This is a very sort of purpley burgundy really, and this is going to be a good foundation for the red that we're building up from here. What we're doing is we're stippling this Blanched Berry towards the center of all of the armor panels where we've painted them previously with that Dryad Bark brown. Now because of the shape of the stippling brush here, it's not going into the recesses much. If it does, it's not too much of a problem. We want this to look organic and worn, and stippling is a perfect choice for making armor look worn and a bit messed up. With the Blanched Berry done over the top of the Dryad Bark, you can see there's not too much difference between those two colors. We've got a brown underneath a sort of cherry, very dark reddish burgundy color. Now, however, we're going to jump right up to a very bright and vibrant red in Evil Sun's Scarlet. And we're going to do this in a stippling motion again, but just slightly less than we did with the Blanched Berry. Now, I would recommend, if you haven't done this before, to thin your paint slightly because it will be much more subtle. However, because I like things to be quite high contrast, I go pretty hard with this. Now, I've actually switched to a slightly more precise brush here. It's still an old brush, but it does have a point on it just about. And this is just for a little bit more control, to be honest, and I'm just using the same motion, just lots of little tiny dots onto the upper areas of these armor panels. It's very important that I don't go into the recesses too much here or go into the sort of shadowy areas. I'm really hitting this from above mainly, but we are going to go with a further step after this as well. This one is mainly just to get that red actually looking red. The thing that stippling does as well is it allows the colors underneath to show through in sparse little dots, and it really sort of gives an organic finish to things. I decided to do the face grille on the helmet in contrast to the rest of the helmet, which is going to be black, by the way. I just think this will pop nicely on this particular miniature, and I love the fact that Games Workshop are doing these helmets again. In 40k scale, I might add. With the Evil Sun's Scarlet laid down, things are looking nice and vibrant and contrasting at the moment. We're going to take it up a notch and add Wild Rider Red to the mix now. This is just going to be used very sparingly, and again in a sort of stippling motion, this time with an even smaller brush. Little dots on the edges of the armor panels around the mouth grille here, and just sort of picking out some of the areas that will get the brightest highlights if the light was above this miniature. This armor recipe would be particularly good for Khorne as well if you wanted to do some World Eaters for 40k, or even Blood Angels as well, so perhaps I'll do a video on either of those two in the future. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see either of those two. This is probably the closest thing you'll ever see to me doing an actual edge highlight here. I don't tend to do them very often, and when I do, it tends to be a series of dots or broken up lines. I don't like the very, very clean lines that you get from typical Warhammer sort of heavy metal edge highlighting myself personally. But in this instance, just adding a few sort of dots to the very edges of these armor panels does make a really good looking effect. We're going to go back to the first color that I used in the armor panels with Dryad Bark, the sort of nice warm brown, and we're just going to fill out all of the leather details on this miniature, the gun pouch, and any straps that you'll find on this guy as well. Now for the furs, I've always struggled with furs personally, and honestly I'm not really sure about this process either, but we're going to use Banshee Brown and Sunburst Ochre on this one. First I'm going to slap on the Banshee Brown, which is a slightly different brown, more chocolatey to the Dryad Bark that I used earlier, and we're going to put this all over the furs on the shoulders here. Again, I'm going to stipple this on with a fairly loaded brush. Actually, I want this paint to remain wet. You could add some water to this if you want to do this as well, but I want things to be quite thick and gloopy in this particular instance. I'm then going to quickly rinse off my brush, dry it ever so quickly, and go straight in with the Sunburst Ochre while this brown is still wet. This is just going to sort of add a sort of type of wet blending, I suppose. We're stippling on top of a wet paint, so things are going to mix together a little bit, and it's just going to create slightly more of a natural fur looking finish. It doesn't often look good if you just slap over a contrast paint or a wash, to be honest. It's best to go with sort of like general either wet blending or something like this, just stippling so that you get random areas of color. Finally, with the fur, I'm going to go in with Rakarth flesh and just do the uppermost parts of the furs here as well, just for some nice high contrast with this particular fur piece. You can see things are still fairly damp at this point, so things are kind of blending together and merging a little bit in more of an organic way. With the fur looking fairly furry at this point, we're going to go in with a nice sort of complementary color to the reddish tones that we've got on this miniature. So far, everything is quite warm or even hot looking. What we're going to do is add some complementary color here, in this case green, which is kind of opposite red generally on a color wheel. This is going to make for all of the fabrics on the model, so the cape and the sort of tabard at the front of this model as well. And in this case, I'm going to be using Blighted Green, which is quite a cold sort of green here. I toyed with the idea of making these a sort of cream color, but I just don't feel it would have looked that good. I think it would have looked quite sort of washed out, especially next to the fur and stuff as well. And again, we're going for a darker scheme here. I just think that the green works really, really well against this bright red armor. Following that, we went with stippling some Cabalite green on, I believe. This is a nice sort of turquoisey green, and it's still not too light to be fair, but this is the only highlight we're actually going to do on the fabrics here, and we're going to stipple it on. And again, sorry to keep harping on about stippling, this is just perfect for creating more texture on fabrics and leathers and things like that as well. So this does look really good if done well. Again, if you've got more time and you're not incredibly impatient of a painter like I am, you might want to spend a while doing several layers of this with more thinned down paint. But honestly, I'm just going straight in out of the pot here, as I usually do, and I'm going straight in and just getting these sort of raised areas on this cape here. And things are looking pretty good. When this dries, it unifies nicely and looks pretty nice. And you can kind of blend things by using your brush as the paint sort of leaves your brush. You can move it around a little bit and just kind of blend things naturally as you go. With the green now laid down on the fabrics, we're going to go in and do all the metal or the silver or gunmetal parts of the miniature with heavy metal, or should I say heavy metal, by Army Painter here as well. This is pretty dark gunmetal. We're going to do the mace here, as well as the sort of iron halo on the backpack, as well as any other key details we want to do in that sort of silvery metal color. With these true metallics, you've really got to make sure you shake the hell out of them before you use them, because you do get quite a lot of texture in these things, lots of chunky pigments in there, so just make sure you shake it a lot before you put it on, because I've found that often these ones can really be quite variable depending on how much you shake them. They're inconsistent to say the least, but I would say you do get a really nice color and coverage out of these. With the gunmetal done, we're then going to go in with a nice bright gold on any of the sort of details that we want to pick out with Retributor armor. This is a very warm, bright, vibrant gold, and we're only going to use this kind of sparingly. There are a few little trinkets hanging around his neck there, and there's also the sort of brow piece on the forehead there that I want to pick out as well, just drawing more attention to the head generally, as well as any other little details that you might see. By the way, in case you haven't seen it, the thing that he's holding in his hand is like an Imperial cross. It's like a Terminator honor or something like that. You can't really see it from this angle, but once I pick it out in gold, you can. It was very hard to make out what this was on the miniature on the website and in the Warhammer community article as well, but that's what it is. It is a Imperial sort of cross. Using a small brush here, and I'm just picking out some of those little details and trinkets and doodads that are hanging off his chest here. We've got an Imperial Aquila, as well as like a few other little bits and bobs in there as well. In fact, there's even an Adepta Sororitas sort of insignia on here as well, a fleur de lis. Baneblade brown is the next color, and this is going to be for the 2 skulls. There are only 2 skulls on this miniature, which is crazy for 40k. Normally there's about 20. Only 2 skulls in this case though, one on the iron halo and one on the belt, sort of hanging by the tabard as well. We're just going to block these out with Baneblade brown. When you're doing skulls and bones and things like that, I tend to go with more of an overbrushing, so I don't overload my brush too much, but I sort of paint from top to bottom, just missing the eye holes and the sort of sockets of the eyes and the nasal cavity as well, because if you do sort of get paint in there, it's just very hard to create lots and lots of contrast again without sort of going in with a detail brush and sort of painting the eye sockets black again. Next up, it's back to Old Faithful Rattling Grime. This one is going to be put all over the gunmetal areas, particularly the mace there, which I have noticed for you Blood Bowl fans, the end of the mace is in fact a Blood Bowl. Now I've seen it, I cannot unsee it. It is a Blood Bowl mace, so there you go. Rattling Grime is just a really awesome, thick contrast color that is somewhere between a brown with a teeny bit of green in there as well. It's a good alternative to Agrak's Earthshade, but it's far more consistent, and I really like my metals to look very, very dark, and in this instance, they really do. Going back to the 2 skulls now with some Wraithbone, we're just going to sort of highlight them very, very roughly with that downwards motion that I was talking about earlier, just to create a bit more contrast, bringing the sort of brightness up on these 2 skulls quite a bit now, because we're going to go and darken these down afterwards. Next up, we've got the glorious Voodoo Shade, which is a really nice color and quite different to the Rattling Grime as well. We're going to be using this for warmer tones on the 2 skulls as well as the golds as well. It's worth noting before this off camera, I did sneakily sort of edge highlight some of the leathers with some sort of light brown that I just sort of found. Sorry I didn't include that on the video, but yeah, it was very, very minimal process, to be honest. I also did the sort of top knot as well, again with that blanched berry that we used earlier. As soon as I start putting this on the Liberator Gold, I realized that it's still a bit bright, so I'm going to have to go in with some Rattling Grime and just make the gold a bit darker after this, I feel. But we've already laid the foundation with this Voodoo Shade and created a slightly warmer finish. Back to black, as Amy Winehouse would say, we're going with Abaddon Black now. This is the darkest sort of Citadel paint I think that they do, and we're going to go around and do the trim very carefully with this Abaddon Black. I will say this is slightly different to the finish of Chaos Black, but we don't really care in this case. We're just going to hit it anyway. We're just going to get all of the trim with the Abaddon Black right now. Get a small brush and just work your way around very, very carefully, making sure not to spill this on any of those brighter red details. More than anything, this is just to tidy up this sort of overspill that you get from the stippling we did with the red earlier. Things will look a lot cleaner after this. While I had the Voodoo Shade out, I also put that over the top of the top knot here as well, just to have a slightly different red on the top knot. I did toy with the ideas of using different colors for the top knot, but honestly, less is more, and honestly I prefer less colors. So we've already got red and green in here. If I added a 3rd color to the mix, I wouldn't be too into the idea. So I thought I'll go with a red, but I'll make it slightly darker and slightly different to the red on the armor here, just by adding that Voodoo Shade on the top. Next up, and again, old favorite, you'll hear me harping on about this in every single video, is Corvus Black. Now, Corvus Black is an awesome sort of natural highlight to any sort of Chaos Black or Abaddon Black. It is a very, very dark turquoise. It's got a bit of color in it. It doesn't look gray, most importantly, and it doesn't look blue either. It's somewhere in between, but it's just nicer. I tend to just leave black there at this point, to be honest, and that's all I'm going to do with the black on this armor. A slight edge highlight and just sort of going over any of the flat areas that might appear in the light here with Corvus Black. I'm pretty happy with things at this point. We're nearly at the end now. I'm just going to go in with a final sort of little pin detail of a very, very bright Stormhost silver. This is just going to be used on any rivets and any points of any blades, things like that. This guy's mostly finished. I want to bring everything down into more of a Grimdark feel, and of course I look no further than Villainy Inc.'s Goon's Grime in this case. Now, normally I would say varnish your miniature before using this. I'm not gonna though, because honestly I'm strapped for time here and I just want to do this without really thinking about it too much. Plus, to be honest, the last few times I've used a gloss varnish, for some reason it's reacted a bit weirdly with Goon's Grime and other oil washes and created a sort of cloudy effect that I really don't like. So I'm going to skip that today and we're just going to go straight in neat with Goon's Grime, and we're going to remove it with a gentle brush strokes dipped in mineral spirits. Just very gentle, mind. The reason why I say gentle is because we did not varnish this miniature. I do not want to remove any of the paint underneath. For me, Goon's Grime is a perfect alternative to a streaking grime. I find it is slightly more aqueous, it runs better into recesses, it's also easier to remove, and it doesn't stain the surface underneath as much. What I also really like about this is the sort of crevices and the deepest recesses. If you leave them, give that sort of dusty look as well, which you don't tend to get with streaking grime. It goes more green generally, whereas with this you get slightly lighter sort of like tan color in some of the recesses, which I quite like. And again, I'm not flooding the entire miniature with this, I'm sort of dabbing it on in a sort of splotching motion, and then I'm going to remove it, like I said, very gently with a damp sort of brush that I've put in some mineral spirits. Now you can already see with this wet that this has darkened the entire miniature down sufficiently, and the armor is still very bright and high contrast, but everything is slightly more unified with this Goon's Grime wash, which is fantastic. However, I do want to retain some of that brightness in the armor panels and some of the other areas, so again we're going in with neat mineral spirits and we're just smoothing things out, taking away some of those muddier areas and just sort of limiting things so that it really is just in the recesses of all the armor panels. So there you have it, folks. A very simple one again, but a slightly more detail in terms of the sort of precision and stuff in this one, for me at least. But it's still a less is more video, so it still qualifies. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video on how to paint a Red Corsair using the sort of modern schemes, but some of my own ideas and techniques thrown in here as well. I went and did the base and I went and did the eye lenses as well off camera, so I do apologize for that. But again, if you want to see me do the bases and eye lenses and things like that, just check out any of my other more recent videos, and I have videos on just doing the bases as well. Anyway, I hope you like this one, and I hope you are excited to start painting your own Red Corsairs or Badab themed army for 40k. I think these miniatures are just glorious, to be quite honest, and even though I don't currently play 40k, I am certainly very tempted to field a Red Corsairs or Badab army at some point soon. Anyway, that's it for now. Stay tuned for the next one. Peace out.